slide here. And just want to welcome everyone and thank you for being here today. I'm really glad that you've chosen to spend this hour together. Today, we are officially launching the Power to Praxis cards and companion guide, which are now available online. This has been years in the making, and I'm very nervous and I'm very excited. But more than that, I thought we could spend some time in the spirit of the cards to create a space to reflect on practice, power, and accountability. Saying that, I begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people and the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians on the lands that I'm joining you from today. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and I honour the deep cultural knowledge, governance, and care that has sustained this country for tens of thousands of years. As we gather for this launch, I want to recognise that this land holds stories, resistance, and survival. The Wurundjeri people have cared for this country through seasons of abundance and hardship, through ceremony and kinship and responsibility to land and water, and this care continues today. Power to Praxis is about reflection, accountability, and acting with integrity. Acknowledging country is not a formality. It is a reminder of our work, of our ideas, and our movements sit on unceded land, shaped by histories of dispossession, marginalisation, attempted genocide, and ongoing struggle for justice and sovereignty. I extend my respect to all First Nations people joining us today, wherever you are calling from. May we continue to learn from the oldest living cultures in the world, and may this work be guided by humility, responsibility, and a commitment to justice. I also just want to briefly acknowledge that today has been marked here in Australia as the National Day of Mourning for the victims of the Bondi attack. It was a horrific tragedy, and I want to honour the lives lost, the people injured, and all those who are grieving. Attacks on civilians are never acceptable anywhere. As people working in development and humanitarian spaces, peace building and healing are not abstract ideals for us. They are part of the work itself. And the work must always be grounded in rights, in respect for human rights, dignity, and in sovereignty. Without that, peace is fragile at best and often impossible. I want to hold this moment with care, without collapsing different forms of violence into one another, and without losing sight of the profound and ongoing suffering being experienced elsewhere in the world. We can grieve, we can condemn violence against civilians, we can condemn violence in total, and we can remain committed to justice and collective liberation at the same time. Thank you for being here today. And thank you to all of those who have written where you're coming from. It's really great to see. And you can also do that in the chat as well. Just acknowledge the traditional lands, or even if you don't know the traditional lands where you're coming from today, in joining us. Next slide, please. So before we move into the content, I want to be clear about how this space is being held. Firstly, I want to acknowledge that this webinar is being recorded and released publicly. I have a garbage truck going by. I'm sorry about the background noise. Mostly because this launch was sold out within a week and there have been many requests for a recording. Saying that, you don't need to speak, you don't need to share, you don't need to be insightful. You're welcome to engage quietly, to reflect privately, or to use the chat if that feels right. You can make comments, share what feelings the cards bring up, or what the cards make you think about. This is a reflexive relational space, not a performance space. It's a real space. Just note that if you talk or post in the chat, this will be seen by others now or in the recording. Gee whiz, I'm so nervous. And then the truck comes by and it just makes it all very real. Thank you for those that are sharing where you're coming from today. Um, and wow, we've got lots of people here. Um, and I feel like I'm talking a lot. Next slide, please. Big thank you to Whitney, who's our IT techie person today. I really want to start by grounding where these cards come from, and here's the cards. I don't know if you saw the video about them and why they exist at all. And then after talking about this a little bit, I'm going to invite some people that are a part of the process, Maria and Yayi. But I want to start by grounding where these cards come from and why they exist at all. They didn't come from a single project or organization. They came from years of working alongside teams, partners, communities, organizations, and from noticing the same tensions that show up again and again in my own work and in many other people's work too. In many of the spaces I work in, it's important to acknowledge that people and organizations care about social inclusion. But so often for myself and for so many other people, when the work gets busy, when deadlines tighten, when funding decisions are on the line, decisions get made really quickly, trade-offs are justified. The people most affected by those decisions are often the least involved in making them. And over time, it became clear to me that the issue isn't a lack of values, it isn't a lack of passion, it isn't a lack of people wanting to do as much as they can. It's what happens when these values are under pressure. These cards were created to respond to this moment. They're designed to be used when you're considering applying for a grant. You know, what does social inclusion look like? What does it mean? What kinds of questions do we have to ask before we even bid? You know, and so it starts to bring into conversation things like, you know, do we have relationships with partners, with communities? Um, you know, to know what they want, what their needs are, what focus they're on, what they're already doing, what need they see in their own communities, and what they would like us to contribute, rather than just developing a project plan based on, you know, a grant and trying to squeeze them in at the last minute, which often happens. Um, they're designed to be used when designing a project, when managing a partnership, responding to feedback, or closing a project. They're designed to be used individually, reflecting, thinking, journaling, or asking these questions with a supervisor. If any of you are lucky enough to still get professional development and have supervisors or coaches, they're designed, you know, to think about particular questions that come up with your team. And they help surface questions we often skip because they feel really uncomfortable. And some of these questions do feel uncomfortable, and they feel uncomfortable for me too. And I think that they feel uncomfortable, or they might feel time consuming or risky to ask. Sometimes because we've never taught to ask them. Sometimes it's about questions around who makes decision-making power. And that was so interesting, particularly in the second workshop, which I'll talk about. It's uncomfortable because sometimes we're asking about, well, who we're actually accountable to beyond reporting lines. And, you know, for me as a really young person, and thinking about and, you know, going to university and exploring new ideas and exploring new things, I remember coming across the idea in community development that community development is something that, you know, the idea is to work yourself out of a job, to support communities, to rejuvenate themselves, to so that they can take leadership and that's what they can do. And so the point of my work was to work myself out of a job. And, the reality of that, what does that mean? Um, where do I get money in this capitalist world? What projects do I sign on to? And so it is really challenging. It's really tricky, and they're challenging for me too. Um, you know, and it really asks about whether participation is meaningful or mostly procedural. And the way that the system's going, I think that's a really, really important question. And it's about how our ways of working might be reinforcing the very inequalities that we're trying to address. And this is where the decolonial aspect of the card sit in practice, not as a label, but as a way of paying attention to how power, resources, and authority are really moving through our work. Decolonial practice here means asking practical questions like who sets the agenda? And you don't have to answer the question. You might only sit with it. You might not even feel comfortable to talk about it with your team. But it's a question to be asking, right? Whose knowledge was relied on? Who carries the risk if something goes wrong? How do we even define risk? Do communities think about risk in the same way that we do? Um, so power to praxis exists to make space for these questions at the moments when they matter most. And while there's still time to do something about them. And that is the gap these cards are designed to work in. Um, Next slide, please. You're welcome to put in chat anything that's coming up for you, any reflections you have. You get to see some of the beautiful images of the cards as we're going through the slides. And so the context we're working in keeps getting more complex. Projects are expected to do more in less time with fewer resources. And I want to say under increasing scrutiny. I think that's a real thing. Even between a design, like, a sign-off phase of a toolkit that I'm just building, and then going through the design process, not this toolkit, another toolkit. We have to get the donor sign-off each and every step, even though the only difference is it's been designed. Can't release it, can't talk about it. I think the scrutiny by donors is getting more. And, I think accountability and transparency, but perhaps not scrutiny. Timelines are tighter, risks are higher, reporting requirements are heavier. In this environment, decision making often becomes defensive. People default to what's familiar or what's safe or what's most likely to be approved. Accountability tends to flow upwards towards donors, contracts, and institutional expectations rather than outwards towards communities and partners. And please, share in the chat. Is this resonating with you, or am I working in a different space to what you are? And these are, of course, generalizations. And when this pressure builds, reflection is usually the first thing to disappear. Not because it's not valued, not because it's seen as something that can be but because it's seen as something that can be postponed or absorbed by individuals in their own time. What gets lost are the small moments we could have asked different questions before decisions were locked in. Power for Praxis is designed for these moments. It creates ethical pause points inside real workflows before a proposal is submitted, before a partnership is finalised, before a decision is justified as the only viable option. Pause points are not about slowing everything down. They're about making power visible at a time that it's being exercised. They help us notice who is shaping the decision, who is carrying the risk, and who will live with the consequence. Just to note what people are saying. Yeah, 100% resonating. The phrase holding space is front of my mind as I listen and see the beautiful images and soft silhouette. It's like the images are a space held in the wider card, and power to praxis lives in that space. The graphic designer will be speaking today too. I wish reflection was just part of our way of working and thinking, just naturally and rewarded a lot more and asking questions. Definitely resonates. So, how to practice is a way of practicing accountability when speed, risk, and institutional pressure are shaping our decisions. And without these pauses, even well-intentioned work can drift away from the communities and values that we all actually just really want to serve. I truly believe that we want to do the best that we can. We care about the work, we have the values. It's about that gap in practice and that institutional power, right? And that power that works through us. So next slide, please. And I'll quickly speed up a little bit. And you can see through here the different beautiful cards. So actually, I did the framing, I think. So you can see that beautiful card there. That is this beautiful one here. There's 10 of each of those ones. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So the first version of the deck was a lot larger. There were 250 questions drawn from journals, workshops, coaching sessions, and moments of tension in the work that I did. The points where something didn't sit quite right, where sometimes for me decisions got rushed, constrained, or compromised, and that happens a bit. And so I wrote out these 250 questions on cards, and I got my friends and said, can you come along? Only one friend could, Subna, and we spent the whole day together. It was at the hub at Southern Cross, and we went through the cards, and she loved all of the questions. And for a very full day, we played them. We played with them, we talked about them, we moved them around, grouped them together, and sometimes even argued about them. And by the end of the day, we started to see a pattern. And we realized that the questions weren't random, they were clustered around moments in a project cycle. They were really uneven. Like I have to say, probably 120 of those questions were just in project implementation. Some of the questions could be used in different parts of it, but we started to see a pattern here. And we realized that, there were really about moments where decisions get made, where power shows up, where things get locked in, but we couldn't decide which questions to keep and which to let go. So I had the second workshop in July last year in Melbourne, NAM. Around 20 people came together to test the questions collectively. It was a random group of people, whoever signed up via Humanitics, that were in the geographical location. I had mapped them onto the project cycle, and together in that day, we worked through them in real time. And this is where the real refinement happened. People gave very honest feedback. Some questions sounded good, but they didn't feel like it shifted practice. Some invited performance rather than honesty. Others raised real issues around risk and powerlessness and what it might feel like to ask these questions inside institutions. And this is really kind of what a lot of the guidebook focuses on. So that feedback really mattered, and it helped me move from a large collection of reflexive prompts to a focused set of 54 questions that people could realistically use. The cards are mapped in the project cycle. And so there's pre-project, that time before a project happens. And random question, what ethical responsibilities come with this project? How do I balance own expectations with community accountability? There's pre-engagement. So after you've signed that contract, but before you've gone into the community, an example question is, how are potential partners identified, engaged? Are local organisations treated as co-leaders or subcontractors? Implementation, the beautiful blue one. Um, an example is, how am I sustaining collective care in this work? What practices prevent burnout and uphold well-being? Um, we have project completion, these beautiful green ones. How have I created space for honest feedback? Do partners feel safe to share critique or unmet expectations? And then there's 4 commitment cards. So this is what makes the 4 in the 54. And so one example is my accountability. Who am I accountable to in this process? How will I stay in relationship with those who can hold me accountable, especially communities or partners most affected by this work? And so alongside these cards, I developed this companion guide, this beautiful book here. It's 84 pages. It has activities. It has all of the questions as well. It has a lineage of decolonial thinkers. Um, and it provides a grounding on how to use the cards ethically and safely inside systems that weren't designed for this kind of questioning. It offers practical guidance on facilitation, accountability, power, and risk. It also includes shared language, context, and lineage, so people don't have to carry this work alone or improvise it without support. The cards are used to be portable and usable in everyday moments. The guide is there to help you go deeper when you need it, to slow down, to make sense of what's coming, and to translate reflection into more accountable practice. Together, they're meant to support reflection that actually changes how decisions are made, not just how intentions are expressed. So I'm going to stop talking. I've been talking a lot. I'm going to invite Maria to speak and to give a little bit of reflection on the second workshop, which she was a part of. So please welcome Maria and
Hi, thank you.
talk about.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm excited and I have some notes from the last year's workshop. So what stood out to me was how they surface question of legitimacy across the program cycle. Who defines the work, who sets the pace, who is visible. And that shifted the conversation from abstract values to concrete practice, with us bringing our stories, our context, and our vision of what those questions mean for us. From a collective sense making, the cards gave us a shared language to name things that are often felt but not spoken. Uh, there was like, well, moments of discomfort where the signals and the questions, pointing to where the power is, where where our comfortable assumptions are. Uh, that protection that that we rely on to keep us moving and not question ourselves. And well, the learning for me was how um, this is useful as an ongoing practice, as an ongoing space. Because if there's no real return to community in decision making, in resources or the control that they have over the project that they're allowing us to implement, then no amount of good language will matter. So the cards are not about getting it right once. They are a tool that we can return and reflect and keep asking ourselves, where are we at? It felt like a grounded way to approach the colonial practice inside our real constraints, even if it's in a personal way or a project way. So those were my thoughts from last year's workshop. And congratulations, Lana. I be very proud of this wonderful effort that you just created.
Thank you so much, Maria. Um, Next, I'm going to invite Yayi to speak. Yayi is someone whom I met politically, not working in the development sector. But I really loved Yayi's approach to graphic design. And I really felt like since I'm doing this on my own, this isn't paid. I don't have anyone kind of telling me that there's any constraints to this. How can we try and mirror the process in a design way? And so I contracted Yayi to help with this aspect and worked really closely with her. So Yayi, would you like to say a few
Hi
words?
everyone. Yes. Hi everyone. Yaya here. I'm really excited to share a little bit about the design process for Power to Practice. Well, I don't know where to begin, but I remember in the beginning just sitting among the sketches and just scratching my head and for a direction. And it became clear to me then that if there was one thing that I needed to get right, it was how this card would feel in someone's hands. They shouldn't feel like the usual, if you will, like a sleek and almost sterile materials and geomaterials. It's not like an activity you could just take off and move on without ever questioning what actually changed. So I thought these cards needed to carry weight, right? And they need to demand us to kind of confront the system that really rewards efficiency and profit about everything else, about real change. So in this case, the cards should feel bold and loud, but at the same time, though, they're loud, but it has to be in a quiet way. It needs to create space for reflection, and it asks for humility rather than certainty and assumption. So balancing this tension between the bold activism and the quiet humility became kind of my North Star and guided every design decision that I made. For example, initially we considered using like color bars and color icons tucked away in a corner on a card for distinguishing between different faces. And that instead, I chose to have the color fill the entire background with the color bigger, with the icons bigger and centered, which makes the card, feel more like a statement. It's also more usable as well because colors and symbols are the most intuitive mechanism for navigation. So having them more obvious means that people can understand them more quickly and get started with using them very quickly. And the iconography was something that we spent a lot of time on since it's the first thing that people would see using the card. And each symbol tells a story. So for example, I'm not going to go through all of it just for the time of it. So for example, the balancing rock in the Pro project phase is, about grounding and foundation, but each stone must be placed with care for the whole structure to hold. And the winding path that reaches to flower for pre-engagement, represents like a journey inward, but not towards castles or some grand answers, but it's about reaching towards humility and understanding, which is symbolized by a flower. So through these visual stories, I wanted the cards feel less like an instruction manual or something that you consume quickly. So I want to feel more like a companion. So each time we use them, it feels like a small ritual. And accessibility was also a major concern. It's something that I value deeply in my own work. I believe that design should be for everyone, not just something that, visually appealing, but also genuinely easy to use for people that it's intended for. So that means throughout the project, it was all about, testing before making assumptions. For example, the card sizes is something we have to figure out along the way. I cut out papers in different sizes, sometimes A5, sometimes A6, or tarot size, or in various of sizes in between. And I asked people to hold them and survey how they feel. So I just want to make sure the cards will feel comfortable in different hand sizes, and they can be easily read, stay legible when they're held. And things like color contrast as well was also treated, was also tested, because we need to make sure that it stays legible for everyone. This was very important to us. So finally, I just want to say this project has been personally very rewarding for me as well, knowing that the cards is, they can be used thoughtfully in this context where I think is deeply meaningful, that carries responsibility. So I hopefully it helps. Thank you, Lana, and everyone.
Thanks, Yayi. And maybe I will ask Whitney if she could just change it to a slide that has all the cards that, so we can just see all the cards on one slide. Yeah, the next one. So you can just see the 6 different types of cards. The design process was, the cards are really great and they are beautiful, and they're really easily able to be read and felt, and the symbols to show which part it's on. I want to say the digital copies are PDF digital design, so you can read it with a screen reader. And the cards in the digital copy do have bleed lines, so you can print them out. If you buy the physical copy, it's beautiful to feel and hold of the book, but it's also recycled paper as well, just to keep with, that values kinds of, with the values that we hold. So, how's everyone going? Yeah. Okay. So what we might do is firstly, I just want to thank Maria and Yayi for sharing, and for Whitney behind in the techie room. I just really appreciate from everybody, including all of the people in the workshops as well, all of the support that I've had to do this project. It's been amazing. It's been able to also think about my community of practitioners and thinking about how to engage with that community and how to think about what the needs are for our community of practitioners as well. And thank you everyone who's coming here that's probably a part of my community of practitioners as well in this webinar today, or listening at a later date and watching. So meet the cards. Let's do a little bit of a live guided reflection. We'll work with 2 or 3 of the cards. It is really just about, there's nothing to solve here. I'll read the questions. I'll invite you to notice what arises. You're welcome to share in the chat or to sit quietly with the questions. Maybe like me, I'm definitely a journaler, write down what you're thinking, but you're under no obligation to do anything at all. So the first card is from the completion, 10 completion cards. And the question here is, do communities and partners agree the work is finished? Do communities and partners share their understanding of when the work is truly done? This is a really good question for me, because I think that sometimes we have this idea of the project's finished when the project's finished, when we've completed all the things. But if we're going in community and it's a part of this project around making change, do they feel like the work is finished? And I think it's a question that, I have to remind myself to ask right at the beginning around what does success look like for communities? And I think that is a question at the beginning still. Um, but this is one for the completion. Um, so just take a moment. Do you like the card? Does it make you think things? There's no right response. Um, you don't have to respond at all, or you can respond quietly to yourself. Perhaps it's a question you might like to go and take away to your team. Maybe it's something you'd like to reflect on, or maybe nothing at all. I'm just going to leave it for a minute. Maybe we'll go to the next card. This is one of the meta reflection cards, and the meta reflection came out of we have the project cycle, but sometimes there's these bigger questions. And so I decided to call them meta reflection questions. And they are more organizational questions, those 10 cards. And this question is, what is our organization's relationships to communities and movements? How are we perceived and whose interests do we ultimately serve? Hmm. Again, this isn't about answers. For right now, it's about noticing patterns and tensions that often stay unspoken. And in that beautiful break, another garbage truck goes by. Yeah, thank you for those that are commenting. Maybe we can go to the next card. And there's 4 change cards. This is what makes up the 54. And there's 4 cards that really support you to look deeply in yourself, acknowledging that of those 50 cards, we do have various different levels of power. And I want to acknowledge, and this is something that came up in the second workshop, a lot of people saying, yeah, but we don't have the power as individuals to change anything. We don't have that power to make that decision. We don't have that power to change this or to do that. And I acknowledge that, but I also acknowledge that as projects, as teams, as programs, as organizations joining together, we can advocate for change as well. And so all of these cards are cards you can come back to at all different times. And the commitment cards are ones we can go back to and look at what changes about ourselves over the time. And so this commitment card is the My Change card. And it's what specific actions, behaviors, or decisions will I commit to shifting? What will I stop, start, or do differently in my daily practice or within my team? And so maybe that's something that you can reflect on for just a minute as well. Is there anyone that would like to share anything about either of those three cards? Any thoughts that you have? Anything that you'd like to say, whether it's actually about the questions themselves or broadly about what's coming up for you about the Power to Praxis pack? You're welcome to share using verbally.
I'm happy to share. I'm new to the group, but hello. And really lovely to be hearing from all of you. I think what's really evident to me is the values and care and responsibility you have all put into creating these from the very first moment all the way through to having this conversation now and the conversations that will continue. And I think I work with World YWCA on a program called Rise Up, which is a young women's leadership program. So young women hold space and power in their own countries and communities in a way that is incredibly hard, really hard. And I think these cards are exactly what we need at this point in time. Project is transitioning from one phase to another, and all of these questions are exactly what we need. And having cards there that aren't an instruction manual and they're not a guide, but they create space to sit and think and reflect, is incredibly powerful gift to be giving the world. So I can't wait to begin using these with our whole program. And, we work in 8 countries, so how people respond to all of these different prompts across all of those contexts will be really, really interesting. But thank you. I feel it's real serendipitous that I was able to join today. It's exactly what we needed in this point in time. So thank you to all of you. It's incredible.
Thank you, Victoria. And I know that we know each other on LinkedIn and we follow each other. So it's lovely to, connect in a way that is interactive.
Yeah. I'm usually traveling and I can never join in the in-person thing. So I'm really, really delighted to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last reflections from anyone? There's some beautiful reflections coming in for the chat, but would anybody like to share verbally?
I love the cards. I especially that first question about, is the work done? I love all the questions, but is the work done? It reminds me how often, as in a place where working for an organisations that run by and supports, women with disabilities, that you engage expecting a certain level of work will be done, but the low-hanging fruit gets sort of picked up, and then they go, oh, that's all we can do. And the hard stuff never gets dealt with. And having that question early, you may still go ahead and do the partnership, but at least you'll know. And there's that discussion about what the parameters of the work actually is.
Thanks, Julie. Another person I've not met in person, but we're in the same city even. I really want to thank you and for everyone on the chat for sharing, but also those that are still here but are just sitting quietly and reflecting internally. And that's really important as well, because this isn't about a performance. This is about creating a space and creating a tool where, in the very least, it allows us just to sit quietly with those questions, even if we don't feel like we have the time, energy, power to do anything about them. It can help us think about, even, is this a kind of organizational kind of practice that we want to continue to do? Or, is this untenable for us now that our values are surfaced? So, yeah. Might go to the next slide. Just a real quick meet the guide. It sits alongside the cards. I don't know if you can see. I can't even see myself. It sits alongside the guide, alongside the cards. It offers depth, context, and facilitation. It has all sorts of things in here, particularly questions that came up in the second workshop. I just want to acknowledge everybody in there, and they are acknowledged in the acknowledgements page of the companion guide. And so it's got things in here like, part 1 foundations, what is reflexive praxis, why reflexive praxis matters, and what is decolonial design. But it's got in things here like responding to common concerns and risks, about accessibility and translation, about institutional accountability, about, well, how do you create conditions for reflexive praxis? About, a bit on core principles for holding reflexive space. What do we mean by safety? Accountability, there's a self-locating tool in there, and about closing the loop as well. There's a part on shared language and lineage, which is the decolonial theorists and lineage table, and the works that have really inspired this. All of the card questions are in there as well, even though this is a bundle set, as well as references and further reading. And so this is a part of the digital and the physical set. It's designed for nonlinear use. You can use them however you like. You can just pick a card. You can go through the project cycle. You can read it from back to front or from front to back. You can do whatever you like, it's about whatever supports you. Next slide, please. So we're nearly at the end. I'm still nervous. I'm always nervous about things. But I wanted to ask you how you hope, like there's been so many great comments here around support and care and love for these cards and how useful you think that they might be. I wanted to ask you to share in the chat, or you can just, unmute. There's not that many people. We can do it. How you hope these cards will live in the world. One word, one hope, one intention. I hope that they live in the world with connection. That's what I hope. But what do you hope?
My word is probably it's hard to distill it into a word, but something around, that for me they really underpin ethical practice. So that's two words, isn't it? Ethical practice. Can't help myself. I'm an academic. It's hard to use only one word. But everything that you've been talking about, even the um, the process that you undertook and the design process that Yayi spoke of, it all speaks to a really ethical practice in how we work, and I love it. I'm really looking forward to using these cards in various places that I work, whether it's on my board I sit on two boards in the development space and research space, in my teaching as an associate professor, in my own research work. Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can use more than one word. Could be an intention, which could be a whole sentence. So I'm seeing kindness, unity, deep introspection, appreciated, authentic. I hope they live in a world with transformation. Oh, yeah. My hope is that it continues for continuous improvement and greater accountability to community. Ditto. Valued, intentional, considered, heart-centered, ethical practice. A wake-up call and deconstruct our way to approach development. Respectful and ethical practice. I hope it lives in a world with acceptance and collaboration between different people and organizations. And I hope they invite people to be comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, particularly with people outside the Jessie sector. Oh, that's a good one. Because I want to say, like, some of these cards make me uncomfortable. And some projects I do better than others. It's not a linear thing. There's so many different constraints and organizations and institutions and all sorts of things. Although I feel like I continually strive, the outcomes vary according to different kinds of context and positionality at different times. And so sometimes these cards make me uncomfortable too. But I think that is that kind of compass, right? As to, are you living to your values? Are you aligning your practice with your values? So we might go to the next, we're nearly finished. We might go to the next slide, which is to think about how can you get a copy of this? So how to order the cards. Thank you, Whitney. There's a link there. You order them through Shopify. There is some physical copies. So there's been pre-orders and that's been all sorted. There are still physical copies available. The physical copies are 125 AUD plus postage, and I have to say already they're being sent to Sweden and Canada and all sorts of places around the world. There is digital copies as for individuals, and they are $65. And the digital copies, as I said, the companion guide is PDF digital book, and the cards are shared with the bleed line so that you can print them out either yourself or go to a printer's. There is, I want to say, also organizational licensing options available. And with that, it means that, there's a country license, which means that everyone in your country office can access them, download them, use them. You can download as many people in that country office. So everyone gets a download. There's a regional license. So imagine you're working on a regional program or that you're organizing you're a regional organization. Again, same thing. There's also a global license. Now, I want to say that it is about ethical practice. So, if you go and share it, I don't have the funds to go and sue you, but it's really about that ethical practice of, supporting all of the costs that's been gone into this, including graphic design costs, workshop costs, printing costs. They're nowhere near covered yet. I also want to say that if you're in a very, very small team, say your country office is only 5 people, for example, just email me and we can come up with an appropriate cost. Because you're not going to buy the country license for 5 people. So yeah, if you work in a small team or your context doesn't quite fit those categories, you're welcome to email me. We can work something out that's appropriate for your situation. I also just want to quickly mention the Power to Praxis circles. They're something that I started holding last year. They're for practitioners. We focus on social inclusion. They're free. They're once a month. I didn't have one in January because I've been taking a break. But the next one is on the 10th of February. They're free or pay what you feel. You can sign up via Humanitics, and this is the one for the first year. Also, and just to note, they're not training sessions. They're shared reflection spaces for practitioners. They're peer support. Yeah. And finally, I publish regularly on Substack. That's where I share ongoing reflections, practice notes, and thinking as this work continues to evolve. So you can stay connected via Substack. I really want to thank you for your presence today and your willingness to sit with the questions that don't resolve quickly. May these questions stay with you for longer than this hour. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's done. We've launched. They're all available. Thank you so much. I'm loving the claps and the love hearts. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Your time, your energy, and effort to come. It's amazing. Thank you. And it was so good to see many of you here that I know, new people that I'm not sure that I know, some people that maybe I know. It's been really lovely. And good luck in the world with the cards.